you mentioned that burnt rubber smell just a minute ago, and so I have to ask you, because when I think of that aroma is the old school skunk.
Yes, yes.
And I happen to know that you've been working on something, right?
I am. I'm digging in the skunk project. And burnt rubber isn't burning rubber with a torch. It's the smell of your sneaker that you stopped your bike with. So when you were a kid riding your bike and you ground your feet on the ground.
Dragging them, yeah.
That smell is exactly what I liked so much in skunks.
And that old skunk, it's been gone. It somehow, along the way, it got lost.
Once we started to take cannabis and put it into clonal form and not hold it in seed form, once you lost the clone, you lost the entire line. And so I've lost a couple of libraries in the past due to a variety of reasons, raids, robberies. But we weren't doing, we didn't know enough. You weren't quite aware of the scarcity of these things. That's an education we learned as we went forward. We thought that it was going to continue to be present. We thought that if you had Afghani in Afghanistan, then you'd always be able to get it. Even you may not be able to get it across from a boat, but you'd be able to access the genetic material.
Sure.
And what we learned is that's not true. In all those home of origins, war, financial considerations took away the populations. And we weren't holding it in seed form enough to where we could go back into it. So once you lost the clone, you lost the tone.
And you're working on bringing this skunk back.
I'm working on bringing it back, and mostly because skunk was one of the varieties that was, and this is an opinion, but it was removed from the system not because it wasn't attractive, but because it was too highly recognizable through scent.
So you're saying it was because that the skunk was such a beacon, that its aroma was such a beacon to law enforcement or thieves or whomever, that it was the indoor growers that ultimately had to kind of start adjusting.
Yes, because after 83, and you started, like especially in Humboldt, 83 began the camp era, everything went indoor. The hydroponic industry explodes at that moment to work with it. The rest of the United States recognizes that they can grow also indoor. And lo and behold, you have this indoor revolution. Well, that indoor revolution, the problem was now you're growing cannabis on a semi-commercial level in a neighborhood, where prior it was growing up in the mountains, so it didn't matter if it smelled. But once you put it inside a neighborhood, the smell of those skunk varieties was so penetrating, and it was so, when you're talking about thiols and esters, they're ultra volatile. And so they move through the room like you can't believe. Would someone tell me it was like a fart in an elevator? And I said, okay, that's a pretty good description. It moves. And
the whole neighborhood would know.
Yes, the whole neighborhood would know. And at that time, it was too risky to take this type of risk. And I was somebody who was building operations at that time, and I started going through populations and finding cultivars that had less distinguishable smells, because otherwise you couldn't cultivate. So I held the aromatic varieties in my library, but we were producing, and for the operations I ran and for other people that were doing the same thing, you started to see a change in the scent profiles of cannabis to become less recognizable. So to me, most cannabis goes through hot periods where it's desirable, and then it kind of goes out of vogue. But skunk was one where it never went out of vogue. It went out of vogue because it was too much penalty to grow it. And for me, it was something that I wanted to see if I could bring back. Could I go back in time and find plants from the early 80s that had these characteristics in female form, and then go back into them and start to dig through these genetic
Now, is this
materials?
stuff that you had maintained in your library? How did you go about, rediscovering? And
I got pretty lucky in the sense that I had a connection in Europe that had an 88 skunk that was unbelievable. And then I was really lucky in that Lawrence Ringo, who was a friend of mine, Lawrence was a collector too, and he had a skunk from Salmon Creek that was from 81.
So you go and you start regenerating this.
I start to regenerate these, and so I have this beautiful aromatic floral skunk that was stunning, and then I have the burnt fuel rubber skunk that's stunning. And so then I was
You're talking sexy talk now.
Oh yeah, it was gorgeous. Rich, penetrating smells, exceptionally positive, uplifting effect. When you come off the skunk, it's not an abrupt drop.
Nice.
So you glide,
Smooth landing.
you glide out of the high, and I still do.
Let's go through. I want to see exactly what papers you use. I'd like to see how you roll.
Oh, totally.
And then we're going to smoke it. We're going to talk about how you light it and the whole bit, man.
Totally.
So let's start with what kind of papers you like to use.
The papers I like the most are the clubs, the old Modianos. And the reason why was that when you took one of these and you lit it on fire, it literally disappeared. And so if I lit this on fire.
No ash.
No, none. What do they call it? Light as a butterfly's wing. So the problem with Modianos is there's no glue. And so you have to learn how to use them, and they're very delicate, so they rip. But what they give you is they give you the cleanest experience, but they're hard to find. I don't even know if they produce them anymore.
No, yeah, you got to find them, in the secondhand market.
Yep,
You know,
difficult to dig up.
They stopped manufacturing them. It's a highly desirable consumable, and the stockpiles are dwindling.
So I brought some flour with me.
Tell us what you brought.
Let's see, we'll break out some stuff. So I brought stuff, and it's funny, I put it in a baggie, and it was to show really that in the old days, brown bag was fine. Like, we hold it in glass at the house. What matters is that we're not crushing it or damaging it or letting it overheat. I brought in some really nice stuff. My buddy Brian from, Riverview Farms, he had some really nice Mendo Breath from Gage Green crossed to a Ghost OG. And so the cherry flavor in this is just deep. And the market goes after typically more of this, which is an OG Chem dog in terms of its visual. A little paler, a little tighter, a little more finished. And the point that I brought them both is that you want to smoke this because the flavor in the mouth is incredible. Beautiful, beautiful high.
I always tell people, look, we're not going to frame this and stick it up on a wall.
No,
okay? We're not going to be staring at it. I care about how it tastes. I care about the effects that it gives me. All right? That's the bottom line.
Those are the important parts. And I take a look and I can see that we have a beautiful resin density all throughout the entire flower and an even consistency. And as I start to break this open and get a little, I can go, oh my gosh, yeah, smell that. That's real hog's breath. And just covered in resin. Remember,
it's got this grape candy.
Yep.
Grape soda.
And hoppy. It's got a lot of humulene in it. But as I start to handle this and feel it, I can feel that I have it's dry, so it's going to give me a good combustion. Otherwise, what it does, it doesn't combust completely. And just if you're looking at this, it's just raining resin, raining it down. Now I can start to break it up here. And as I'm doing this, I can feel the tackiness still. And what people say, like, why do you take the time to do this? And I said, a lot of the reason was that one of the beauties of smoking cannabis was that it was this private moment for yourself to be able to sit down and take a few minutes out of your workday and build you a joint. When I hung out with I had a bunch of Jamaican partners back like late 80, early 90, but like real Jamaican. And they would always tell me,
Jamaican.
Yeah, real Jamaicans. They'd be like, oh, build you a joint. And it was build you a joint, and they never shared joints with each other because you should have your own joint to smoke so you didn't have to rush.
I'm a firm believer of that myself, for what it's worth.
Yes, no, I do too. I would rather roll two and you have one and I have one, and we can share, but the beauty in not sharing is that we don't have to rush. I can smoke as much as I want. I can take a really good rich hit, and all of a sudden it hits me. I can contemplate, like, wow, I can experience all the cannabinoid effects.
And for me, that's just such a huge part of the connoisseurship.
Oh, completely.
Stop,
it's intimate.
Take time, enjoy the moment, enjoy the ritual, enjoy the process, enjoy the aromas that are coming up as you're rolling that joint.
And rolling, there's a lot of different thoughts on size of the joint. And basically, around a cigarette is good. Every now and then you'll go thicker and bigger because you're just so happy you have extra cannabis.
So you're putting a little pre-fold into there. What do you show? Tell us what you're doing.
What I'm doing is it's just creating basically a trough. So that when I hold this in my hand like this, I have something to trough it into.
The trough, when you do that pre-fold, you make that trough, because I do the same thing. It kind of gives a little stability to it, a little structural stability. So when you go and you load a whole bunch of cannabis in there, like you're doing right now, and then you get it into that one hand, it's.
And look at this pile. And look at that pile of resin.
Well, give them a minute to capture all that before you scoop it all up, because it's quite impressive.
Yeah,
actually.
it looks like sand on the table, and I love this.
You've already scooped up almost half of it.
Yeah. But you can just see it. It just was falling out of this. It's all over the place. I mean, we'd scrape this whole thing up. And I'll typically just take this right here and I'll just push this down a little bit so I can get a little bit of density. And that just means that it tightens it up. And I'm not worrying about what's falling out the end. And I can just bend this paper back like this.
Give it a little lick before you tear it.
I just tear this shit right off. And it doesn't have to be pretty. It never is. It looks rough as hell.
Yeah.
And we just wrap it like this. And once we have this, then I can lick it. And then now the next part is leave it alone and let it dry.
Yeah, you mentioned earlier about about the burn test on these.
Yeah, we're gonna light that baby up.
Let's see.
Yeah, just disappears.